So tell me, Apple or Android? The battle's
Oh,
here. Who wins?
Apple, 100%.
Are you getting paid to give out that answer right now or no?
No, but I'll tell you this, as somebody who's super into privacy, right? And like preventing companies and folks from tracking you, Google and Samsung are an open book. So anything that you do on your phone, even if you turn off the setting, gets sent directly to their services and sort of compiled. So from I'm not saying Apple is good. I'm not saying Apple is the angel in this situation too. We've been able to somewhat trust them, uh, like this far, but that doesn't mean that that won't change, right? So
Mhm.
it's not an Apple or Google thing. For me, it's a who's going to do the most to prevent or to protect my privacy, as a person who uses my phone and, computer all day long.
Do you trust them though, 100%? Like, are you still like
No, fuck no.
iffy? All right.
For the conversations that I do need to have, I use Signal, right? Signal app messaging, which is private end-to-end encryption.
Mhm.
Signal is currently being funded by the folks that made WhatsApp, right, which is owned by Facebook. If you're wondering why the creator of WhatsApp is funding a privacy-focused app,
Mhm.
right, there's a lot that you can read up on that online.
Interesting. Oh, that's good stuff. For everybody listening in, if you're not watching the video on YouTube or Facebook and you want to put a face to the name, be sure to check out Peter Piekarczyk. If you want to find an easy way to say that, it's pies, cars, and chicks, right? Uh, Piekarczyk. And he runs Draftbit, draftbit.com. You are a co-founder, right, at Draftbit. Is there any other social media site that you prefer people to track you down at?
Twitter is my main game. It's Peter P M E. So Peter, P as in Piekarczyk and then M-E. And my website is peterp.me. And that's where that alias sort of comes from. All my usernames are Peter P M E.
Awesome. And obviously right now, as we're filming this podcast, this episode, it's a crazy time, right? You probably didn't expect anything like this. I mean, we all expect the downturn, right? Sooner or later, because things were perfect, up, 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 and up, but we didn't expect it with this kind of, I guess, astounding consequences that we're all gonna come out of it with, right?
Yeah.
And you have employees, right? You have employees slash contractors, I'm assuming, right? All over. How has
Yeah. I
that
mean, mostly, I'll go ahead.
how has that hit you on a personal level and company level?
It hasn't been too bad per se. So we have about 14 employees, just full-time people distributed across the world. We have folks in San Francisco, Chicago, Spain, and Poland. Believe it or not, Poland is a very up-and-coming place for mobile app development,
Mhm.
and two of the major creators that helped build the Facebook framework happen to be from Poland. And me being Polish, that
Right?
it's
Shout
easy
out.
for us to work for folks, right, and yourself too, right? So
And for everybody that's, we are referencing, in case you're listening to this in the future, we are referencing COVID-19 coronavirus. That's kind of the topic I guess I'm assuming there's going to be nothing else crazier than this. So if you're watching, you would know. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so what happened is we're actually in the midst of moving into a bigger office, or we
Mhm.
were, right? We were in River North, right, in Chicago, which is a nice space right above Guilt Bar. It always smelled like barbecue, which was nice. But our lease was coming to an end, and we were been looking for a longer term, bigger space that we could grow in. Uh, this whole thing just kind of screwed all that up for us, right? Like we were asking ourselves questions like, do we need an office like this anymore? Do we need it to be this size, right? Are we going to continue pursuing, like remote? Like, are we making that a big option?
Mhm.
Uh, so what happened was we were always based in Chicago from the very beginning. And then one of our co-founders had to move to San Francisco, unrelated to Draftbit. So that's when we had our first remote person as a co-founder on top of that.
It was probably
And
the
then
wife, right? It was probably the wife that made the
yeah,
move. Of course.
yeah, yeah. She had an amazing opportunity and it would have been hard for them to say no, right?
Yeah.
So and it also works out that San Francisco happens to be the tech hub of the world, right? So but anyway, so that was our first taste of having somebody full-time remote. And I know it was tricky for him at first, but then we started hiring folks from all over, not just from Chicago. We're building a tool that builds tools, right? So it's a little different than like your traditional mom and pop tech shop consulting company where, hey, you know what? I got this great idea. We have this paper business. Can you build an app for it, right? What we're doing is we are building an app that generates other apps. So the level of skill required, fortunately or unfortunately, is a bit higher, right? And so we sort of, as somebody who, I'm very involved in the Chicago tech scene. I run conferences, meetups, had my own podcast before, right? Several CTO summit groups or whatever. We've started exhausting folks that we could potentially hire in Chicago, right? Either because they've already got an amazing job somewhere else and aren't looking to move, right? Or for other various reasons, right? So that's when we decided to give hiring remotely a shot. And so our second remote hire was this all-star from Spain. It's somebody that I knew from the scene already online, right? Somebody who is very much involved in the open source, right? Like, just a really great individual, right? And it's one of those like experiences where it's like we can't pass on this person. Even if they're remote, we should at least give it a shot. So we did, and now we've got a radically different time zone, different cultures, right? And just like remote full time. Long story short, it worked out, and we continue doing that and continue our hiring process with the realization that like if the next 15 employees we hire are remote, we're totally okay with that. Mm-hmm. So now to round this back up to the original question.
Yeah.
So it has affected us because productivity is low, right? Like, it's easy to like get distracted and check Twitter, check the news, right? And that you're not being able to go outside or do the things that you're used to, right? So productivity has gone down a bit, but that's nothing that nobody is upset about, right? This is the reality of the situation, and we're doing the best we can to help our team. We basically, we told the whole team like, hey, we're going to be working home for the next 4 to 6 weeks. If there's anything that you need, monitors, desks, utilities, right? We gave everyone an Instacart Express membership so they could order food, not have to leave, right? Just trying to make it as easy as possible, right? So don't stress out, right? Like you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, right? Like, God forbid, somebody gets affected, right? It's going to fuck with you, right? So just know that we understand because we're living the reality ourselves.
Yes.
Right.
So do they get just the memberships to Instacart or free groceries too?
No, just the membership. Like we're not paying for people's food, right? So
it's like, man, I always heard about the good life at tech companies. What am I doing? What am I doing wrong here?
Yeah.
But, a little bit more about Draftbit itself, right? You help people actually make apps without having to sit there like I was trying to sit 4 years ago and going through a crazy tutorial for months, and I ended up getting nowhere with it. I made like a front cover of an app, and like that's as far as I got. But you let people make apps in minutes, right? From what I
yeah. Depending on the app, but yeah. So if you were trying to go down the traditional app building experience, you'd have to A, learn how to code, right? B, figure out which platforms that you want to build for, right? Whether it's iOS, whether it's Android, which now like Samsung does their own thing, right? C, set up all the tools required to do that on your computer, right? So Xcode has, iOS has Xcode, which is a 30 gigabyte computer, right? That's like 10% of your hard drive, right? It's this massive application. There's Android Studio for Android, right? Like, anyway, the list goes on of the things that you have to do to get started. You really need to want to learn how to do it, right? And so folks end up, passing on it, and I don't blame them. I started with web development. It was a lot easier. Mobile app development was a nightmare. So anyway, what we've done is you go to draftbit.com, right? You scan a QR code, right? Like you put your phone up to a QR code,
Mhm.
and then you start building, right? We handle the setup. We handle the materials required, right? You don't need anything on your computer. We handle all that in our servers. And then when it comes to actually, so we got the setup out of the way, right? There's the actual coding part. Well, what we've done is we've built, buttons and a GUI to make that process easier, right?
Mhm.
So what we do behind the scenes is generate the same source code that a senior developer would write. And that's not to say you can't build any type of app, right?
Yeah.
Realistically, you could probably build maybe like a proof of concept that you're interested in and then ship it to production and it'll work great. But like you can't do like VR or machine learning or, like just to throw that out there,
Yeah.
right?
Like if you're trying to build something completely from scratch, groundbreaking, right? It's not going to be, you can only do
Yeah.
as much as, right, as the app allows.
Can I share my screen? I have it pulled up. Is that something you're interested in?
Yeah, go for it. You have
Cool.
to guide podcast
Yeah, for
listeners
sure.
of what you're actually showing.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go through the entire process, but here's what Draftbit looks like. So in terms of the layout, you've got this kind of preview, right? Like right here. This is a Airbnb clone that we've made called RentBit, right? And then you can discover your next stay, right? So you have the image that you place there, like the text that says discover your next stay, the button for create an account, right? All the little things that are a nightmare, right? And if you were to code this, right, we actually give you all the source code. You can see there's a lot that you'd have to figure out on your own, right? So without getting into the details, it takes hundreds of lines of code to generate a screen as simple as this, right? And then you see this like complex thing going on here, right? So this is what I like to call the guardrails, right? So a developer has a text editor, right? And you write code in a text editor. That's the Wild West, right? What's happening is that you can type whatever you want, and 99% of the time it doesn't
Yeah.
work, right?
Oh yeah.
It's trial and error, right? For everyone that thinks that you have to be a genius to be a developer or whatever, no. It's like learning a foreign language, right? Like Spanish or Polish. You're gonna make mistakes, but then it's all I do is trial and error,
Yeah.
right? So what we've done is we built guardrails around those things.
Mm-hmm.
If we want something to work a certain way, you just click the button, right? Or if you want things to be spaced a certain way, right? Like you just like change it, right? So if we wanted some space between the sign in and create button, like we just do it there, right? We just
Yeah.
set the padding to 12 pixels.
Yeah. I wish for those not watching the actual screen, essentially you've eliminated all the crazy coding that scares everybody away and made this into like almost a dummy proof. I mean, not that anybody can do it, but it seems like I'm just plug and playing, right? Essentially, like
Yeah.
using the website that's very popular right now, Canva, like using Canva to make crazy Adobe Photoshop photos without going through the whole process of learning Photoshopping.
Exactly, right? That
Kind
we're
of
taking
seems
that
like.
same approach, right? Or like a Squarespace, right? If you've heard
Yeah.
of those, right? Same sort of idea.
Awesome. And kind of back to full circle. You were funded. You were funded by YC, right? We were one
Yeah.
of 1% companies that reached out that actually got
Yeah.
funded, right? That doesn't happen often. How's the process of going about that? Like, actually applying through and getting becoming funded like that way.
It was, so I guess I have got a different opinion now that I've been through it,
Yeah.
right?
And if you could
Uh,
explain what that means to the
yeah.
average listener.
So Y Combinator is this sort of incubator. They were the first to call it a startup accelerator, right?
Mhm.
And the problem that YC solved originally was back when you wanted to build a company and raise money, you'd have people giving you money that had no idea what it is that you were working on or the vision, right? It was finance people writing checks for startups. And so they wanted big checks, they wanted returns, they wanted all these things, right? Those things just don't exist in the early stages, right? And so Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston, the founders, said, you know what, this process doesn't work, so we're going to try something else, right? So what they started doing is offering folks, in the very beginning, 15 years ago, $30,000 of 7% of the business, right, with as much funding and experience as you want, right?
Yes.
And those early companies, the reason why Y Combinator ended up becoming this radically huge success was because the first few founders that went through created Dropbox, created Airbnb, DoorDash, Instacart, right? Created Stripe, Gusto, Segment, PagerDuty, Coinbase. If you're into crypto, right? Like Weebly went through it. So a list of some major businesses, right? So that's Twitch also went through it, right? So that's where Y Combinator sort of got its name on the map, right? And the process has changed a lot since then, right? The companies accepted were, back then it was like 15 companies, right? And now like they accept 100 companies and have 15 partners, right? Instead of just the 2 of them, right? So it's definitely evolved. So I think like the appeal of joining, like I don't think I was any special, right? I think I just happened to be on an idea that, like a couple of years ahead of its time that they were particularly excited in, right?
Yeah.
And then in terms of the network, though, I think it's what you make of it. Like with anything, you could go to a great school and party, or you can go to a great school and network and meet professors and be the next Elon Musk, right? So it all depends on your experience, right? So YC definitely does a good job of curating that network, but it's what you make of it, right? It's I can talk to Brian Chesky at Airbnb, but if I'm just like, hey, what's up, man? That's not going to work out, right? Because he's a very busy person, right? So it's sort of what you make of it and sort of what you want to make of it.
So it's for everybody else, it's kind of like the Shark Tank of tech companies, right? Almost.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's like applying to a college, and then you go through several interview processes, and and then you have to move out there. You have to move out to San Francisco through the program, right? So we lived in San Francisco for 6 months.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You must. You have to. You can't do YC without living out there, because you go to their offices twice a week for meetings, mentorships, for dinners, right? So they do a YC dinner Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you sort of meet with your current batch. You hear from other founders, and you hear about what you shouldn't do.
So if someone right now has this, wild idea for a tech company, would you recommend going this route? And, how would they go about applying, trying to get early investment?
Yeah. So YC does, I think, 3 cycles now, right? Winter, summer, and spring. Or it might just be 2, winter and summer. I forget. It's been a couple of years. And you just apply, right? And the reality of it is if you just apply with an idea, they'll say, like, maybe, why don't you talk to us 2 weeks from now, show us what you got, right? And the expectation is that if you don't know how to code, you figure out how to code, like you show them a proof of concept 2 weeks later, as crappy as it is, because you have to want it, right? You really have to want to go through the program to get accepted.
Did you have the program ready before you went up to them already?
Oh yeah, I mean we're like I've been a developer for years, but like say for example for us, right? Like there was a month between when we first started applying and whatever, right? So every time we'd show up, they'd be like, oh, so like have you been working on it? Like what have you learned? And we would explain like, yeah, like this is what the app looked like when we first applied, and then here we are a month later, like something radically different. And I think for them they were most excited. So I'll throw out there, when we first applied to YC, we weren't applying with Draftbit. We applied with a different company.
Oh.
And so
that's a curveball.
Yeah. So a month, they were like, whoa, how'd you do that so quickly? It's like, well, like I'm originally in this like crew of developers that just have a knack for building mobile apps, right? So I just have some tricks up my sleeve, friends that, ex-Facebook, Apple and stuff, that we work together, And they're like, interesting, right? Like these people know how to churn, right? Like, because a startup is all about pivoting, right? Like the longer you take between versions, like the lower the chance of you succeeding, right? So we would stay up all night just like fixing things for our users the next day, right? And still do. So we were working on a personal CRM called Orchard. way to manage your personal and professional network. I'll never forget that line. That was our YC one-liner, right? They're like, how do you explain your business? Well, we're in a mobile app that helps teams, or oops, now I'm mixing them up. A personal CRM that helps you manage your personal professional network, right? And we got through the program with it, but then through the fact that we had so much feedback every single day, we learned that maybe we weren't working on the right thing, right? And we had an existential crisis, right? Like a lot of people do, right? Like, oh my God, we just raised all this money from investors, right? Like, not just from YC. We had investors before YC, right? Like, we got a couple $100,000. Just, my co-founder and I weren't taking a salary, right? Like we were just kind of doing the best we can. And now here we are, right? Like, well, what do you mean? Like we're asking ourselves, like, what do you mean this isn't the right idea, right? Like, what are you going to do now, right? Like, so we went through this existential crisis. We would show up home after every meeting, like we were upset with each other, right? We were just sort of like in the lowest point of our company's trajectory. And it's been 6 months, right? So after some time, we made a bunch of random tools. We built this tool called Twitter Prospector that help you connect with like-minded people for hiring on Twitter. That was stupid. We built an internal YC messaging app. That
sounded cool for a second.
Yeah, right? All these things sound cool, right? So we worked on like 3 or 4 different things before we got to Draftbit, right? And Draftbit was
this is like straight up Silicon Valley right here, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be your favorite show, right?
It is because it's so corny, but I could relate.
Not ironic at all.
We lived in a house, right? And our living room was our freaking office, right? And we were straight in Silicon Valley, right? Like we got to drive. Like I happen to have some big tech friends, right? Like so getting to drive their Lambos and stuff. Like I got to drive the creator of Gmail's, Paul Buchheit's Fisker Karma, which is like this electric sports car, right? So there's a video of me doing that, right? So
I was gonna say, I'm surprised you weren't just getting driven around in Teslas all day. I thought that's all they do nowadays.
Yeah, well, like for example, our landlord at the time was some sort of a Tesla dealer or whatever. So he would always make sure to tell us, So here, I'll share this visual with you. Yeah, so this was our house, right? So we lived down the street from Perry, the donkey from Shrek. His farm was literally 3 blocks away from where we lived.
So for everyone, listening on the podcast, you have to go on our YouTube, PodRiver Media, and check out these pictures, or on the Facebook page, Boss to Boss, because this is great. Like this house is actually very kind of similar, right?
Yeah.
To the show, Silicon Valley a little bit. Wow.
So this house isn't there anymore, right? So this house was a piece of shit. It was a $3.5 million house that hasn't been renovated in over 50 years.
Of course.
Whenever you flush the upstairs toilet, the grass out front would bubble, right? And we were paying $10,000 a month or whatever to rent this place. So our living room was the office, right? So believe it or not, 3 people in this photo aren't on the team anymore, right?
$10,000 a month?
$10,000 per month for this. Nice. So the reason why we got to live there, so on a $3.5 million mortgage, you're paying at least $16,000, right? So I was like, why are we paying so little? Well, in Palo Alto, if you want to knock a house down, you have to go through a process of appealing it with your neighborhood. And that's a 6-month process. So this guy just had this empty house. We happened to come along and say, hey, can we live there until you knock it down? And he was like, sure. So he was hedging his losses against us. So, we needed 6 months. He needed 6 months, right? Now there's a major mansion on this property.
So I'm assuming normally this would cost like $20,000 a month.
Oh yeah. Yep. At least 20. I mean, and we're talking this house that you see here, kitchen cabinets from the 50s, right? Like no renovations whatsoever, $20,000 per month. Other houses are probably it's probably worth $7 million now. So we're talking double, right? So when you're talking about the Silicon Valley bubble, when you talk about people making $600,000 a year, it's not like they're rich. They're living in houses that are $40,000 per month. So there's some perspective for everyone, who thinks there's a lot of money being made.
Yeah.
There is, but if you're just a normal employee at Google or whatever, you're making enough to afford to live in a home.
Do you think this bubbles out? I mean, right now, obviously, with the virus going on, things will naturally take a hit and have taken a hit. But do you think there will be another Silicon Valley like bubble type?
No, I think Silicon Valley is here to stay, and let me tell you why from an investing opportunity perspective. So when we were raising money for Draftbit, right, we haven't disclosed the amount that we've raised, but we raised a substantial amount. The reason I live in Chicago is because I've always wanted to build a tech hub here. And my founder, Brian, as well. Brian was the first managing director of Techstars in Chicago. They sold to OkCupid. They lived in San Francisco for a while and then all moved here, right, and started doing other things, right? So we both were aligned on this mission of building a business in Chicago, building the community here so we could have our own mini bubble, right? But then when it comes to raising money, good luck. We all sort of do small investments here and there, right? Just to help people get started, right? But then when you need cash, when you need a couple $1 million, right, which most companies do, and let's say you are pre-profit, right, like you're still in sort of the MVP mode or looking for product market fit, right? You're not going to find that money in Chicago, unfortunately. You have to go out west to raise it. And you will find that money day of. You fly out to San Francisco, and whatever size of check that you want, more or less, you will find, right? And then what you do instead
if you have a good idea, right?
So let's say on an idea you can raise $100,000 overnight, right? On an idea, right? Like for us, business, like you can easily start getting into the 7 figures once you hey, this is the product that we've got, right? We're established. We're not making money yet, right? Like there's a lot of things that we have to build, right? We're climbing Mount Everest, right? Do you believe in us? In Chicago, you'll hear, well, how much money are you making? Are you profitable? No? Okay, you know what? Then call us when you do. And what ended up happening for us is the folks that initially declined us started hearing about the companies that were backing us, the investment portfolios that were backing us in San Francisco, and then wanted to come back in, right? But, we filled the round, right? It's like, hey, you had your opportunity, right? We filled the amount of money that we needed to raise, right? And so just to sort of like come to an end with this, if you want to raise the money you need for your company to live, San Francisco will always be there because San Francisco is probably the only place in the world where people believe in your wild idea because they probably made it on their wild idea. You know what I'm saying? Right? So it's all ex-founders, it's all product managers, engineers, designers that happen to have stumbled upon, massive amounts of money that then start these funds, right? So you get that support, right? People understand if you've got this crazy dream, right? You're still talking to finance people in Chicago, whereas in San Francisco, you're showing up with a kid wearing, flip-flops and a yellow polo, right, with the collar popped, saying like, yeah, I'll write you a $10 million check today.
And that's the part, I guess, for me that I'm still trying to break through, break down, like how is that long-term sustainable though? Because a lot of it is based on beliefs, like you said, right? I believe in you, so I'm going to pass it down that I believe in somebody else. Like, what if people stop sort of, buying the coffee for that next person in line?
Sure. So that's already happened, right? So we've been through several phases of that, right? So every time some radically new technology comes out, like a few years later, the bubble bursts, right? The San Francisco bubble is so big, though, that you've had multiple bursts that only folks that are living through it understand, right? So, when, the internet emerged, right? People were handing out money left and right. The bubble burst because people were raising money on stupid ideas, right? And we all got smart from that, right? And then it happened again, right? 10 years ago or so, right? People were raising money on silly ideas. The iPhone came out. We had the App Store, right? Like I can change the world, right? And a lot of those companies, right? Like, believe it or not, like Uber and Lyft started in 2007. People don't think that, right? But like that's when those ideas like came out, right? So you had a couple of those winners, but yeah, there were folks that were trying to raise money on something that didn't work, right? So folks are getting smarter, right? So you can't just show up and say, hey, I've got this great idea. Can I get the money? Prepare to sit through and have somebody who's more or less probably smarter than you are, right? Yeah. Just being like, okay, what about this? What about this? Looking for the holes, right?
Yeah.
And if you can at least admit, like, you know what, I haven't thought about that, right? You know what, that's a good point, right? Or give a good, complete answer, like, you know, you've spent some time thinking about this, you will get that money, right? But it's not like, hey, I've got this great idea, can I get 100 grand, right? Like you're going to work for it, but it will happen, right? If you're truly onto something, and you know, maybe if it's helpful, right? Like if you know, I'm sure, you know, somebody who does this podcast, you hear this a lot sometimes from maybe outsiders, right? Like, I've got this great idea for a business. I've been sitting, you know, I smoked the bowl, was watching TV, and then, you know, thought like, oh my God, right? Like, what about this like cheesecake delivering service, right? And you're like, what the fuck do you know about cheesecake, and what the fuck do you know about delivering, right? So that doesn't fly, right? But if you're like, hey man, I work, you know, I work in this produce business, right? And the produce business is still pen, paper, pencil, right? You know, like I went to talk to a bunch of other companies, our competitors, and they're doing the same thing. And I'm thinking about building an app that takes us away from pen and paper and doing it online. What do you think about that, right? Now you've got somebody who's been thinking about this, who's got domain expertise in that field, right? Somebody who's got at least a 1% chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's the type of idea it takes to raise, you know, any amount of money in San Francisco.
Do you need to have expertise, or can you just have the right people around you as long as you have the idea?
I mean, I follow the mindset that you need background experience, right? You like whatever you're working on, you should have some industry like, and maybe this was just like YC, just shoving it in your mouth, like, right? Like you need experience, because what you need is the edge. You need to be able to see what nobody else is seeing, right? And maybe it could be a couple other people that are at the same place that you are, right? And that's where, you know, you've got Uber, you've got Lyft, right? You know, you've got DoorDash, you've got Instacart, right? So folks that come from these industries that understand where they fall short are the successful entrepreneurs. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
No, keep going.
So, I think, sure, maybe you have smart people around you, right? But like, if you were trying to build a mobile app building business, and I had experience building mobile apps, there might be a day where I decide, you know what, I've got the experience and the expertise, I can do this on my own, right? Like,
screw you.
Well, you know what I'm saying? You know, the success of building a business is already 1%. You know, like even Draftbit's at 2% now, right? Like, you know, think about all the things that could go wrong, right? Everything goes wrong, right? A lot of times you have founder disputes, right? Like you spend as much time as you do with your girlfriend or partner or wife or whatever, right? You know,
crazy, right?
Yeah,
entrepreneurial life.
Exactly, communication issues, right? You know, like. Rarely is it your competitors that kill you, right? Rarely is it your competitors. It's all internal, right? It's all about you've made some mistakes internally, and you either make up for them or you don't realize it and it kills you, you know?
What made you, you know, get off the wagon of the regular 9-to-5 life? Because that's what you did for a while. Obviously, you had some entrepreneurial tendencies throughout your life, but what made you just jump ship one day?
It's always something that I wanted, right? So I was actually supposed to be a lawyer. I taught myself how to code when I was younger, right? You know, like building these websites and logos on eBay and selling them, and then like building a blog that ended up getting, you know, a ton of hits and stuff. But then when it came to applying for college, I did not want to do computer science. I don't have a computer science degree. I fucking hate, you know, like the black text on a white screen, the pocket protector computer scientist. At least that was the way that it was portrayed to me back then.
Same here.
Right? So I was like, fuck that. I'm going to do the next best thing. You know, like coming from Polish parents, right? Like, you know, do some higher education crap, right? Or whatever. Even though my parents, my mom did believe that I should go into computer science. Maybe I was just like a lazy piece of shit, you know, like fuck the system kid back then, right? So I ended up wanting to go to law school, right? Throughout that process, I built a lot of websites because I was making money selling tickets. I was throwing shows, right? Like we brought like Wiz Khalifa and Big Sean. I got to go on tour with Big Sean to Cleveland after coming to U of I, right? I got pictures of that. It's pretty cool.
How'd you sell tickets for them? What do you mean?
Well, so what we would do is we would hit up their managers back before these people were famous. They're super famous now, right? I don't know anybody, through that. But back then it was just like college tours, right? So you'd catch wind, right? Mm-hmm. And say like, hey, we want to bring you to U of I, right? Like we'll do all the marketing, we'll build the tickets. And we're all college students. So we're like, I'm not using Ticketmaster or Eventbrite. I can fucking build this myself. So I did. And I built these ticket portals, right? And I'd use like PayPal, whatever, right? Just like you go to a site and it's just like buy ticket, just like a button, Big Sean, like Canopy Club,
So you took the processing fees like for yourself, essentially. You made some side hustle money, right?
Yeah. Because we weren't selling tickets for like $100. It was like $20.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So like if there was like a $6 processing fee or whatever it was, it's like, well, then we don't get it. So it was just easier to PayPal, pay the 3% and call it a day. Then I keep the rest. Obviously you have to pay the artist too, right? So that was a big chunk of that. I was building these things, right? And then still like, going through the process of applying to law school, got into DePaul, got on there like almost a full scholarship. A week before I dropped out, I was like, fuck this is not for me. Because my friend reached out like as like a kind of like coming to life, moment. He's like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like come work for me, like come work at this company that I'm at right now. Like you don't need a CS degree, like, cause I was like 22, right? What did I know? You don't need a CS degree. You're good at fucking building websites. Like come work here for a little while. And I did. And the interview process was pretty short. I got in, right? So that was my first company, right? Got really close with like the CEO and the COO. I would write like 3-page, hey, we use Microsoft Link. This is a shitty tool. We should consider using Slack or HipChat or whatever, right? And I would write these like 3 to 5 page, analysis of why we would be better off. And I would like deliver them to the COO and be like, you know what, we're switching, right? But the people directly above me did not like that, right? They did not like me coming in and changing everything, despite the COO being okay with it, right? So that's where sort of things started getting a little funky. Right?
Which company can you reference which company this was?
Yeah, so it was One North. One North Interactive is they're an awesome website agency.
Okay.
Right. They build some of the most interactive websites. Right. Usually it's been like law firms and accounting firms. Right. So big business. Right. I still talk to a lot of people there. I love the people that I used to work with. Right. But like I said, there's always. It's like, oh, what is this fucking 23-year-old idiot? I've been here for 15 years, right? It's like, what is this idiot trying to do, right? So I didn't blame them, right? I'm not.
Yeah.
I didn't blame them for any. So anyway, so then I went. I was looking for something else, right? That was a consulting environment, right, where we built websites for other people at an hourly rate. So I wanted to go work for a product company, which is you have one product, right, that you're building on internally, right? And for me, and that's like a product company is like Airbnb, right? They don't build things for other clients, right? They have their own software that other people use. So that's where Trunk Club came into play. Trunk Club was based in Chicago. The idea was like men love to look good, but hate to shop, right? So, you'd have these stylists, you'd have these amazing wardrobes, right? And you get this, like, if you go online, if you went through the self-service online process, you get this big trunk in the mail with your suit or your garments, socks, boxers, like super nice Eaton $300-400 shirts, right? So, and it was a very high class, high luxury, like I learned a lot about the fashion industry. I learned a lot about how to build products and met a lot of great people there, right? And at Trunk Club, my boss, Mike Cruz, who's the VP of engineering, right, top of the totem pole, he sort of became like my mentor and is now sort of my friend. He was like, man, like, you think differently, like if you ever leave from here and go get another job, I'll be disappointed, but like if you go and start your own company, like I'll support it and I'll even, like invest in that company. So, I would hear a lot of that, right? Like
that's awesome.
I got close with our leadership, right, and still asked them for advice all the time. They sold Trunk Club for $350 million to Nordstrom, right? So it was a big acquisition, right, especially for Chicago. So I'm just fortunate enough to have been part of that, from the get-go.
Awesome. And then eventually you just decided. So did you leave them willingly and to start the business up, or?
Yeah, like there was a point, about a year after. So what happens is your company gets acquired, right? Your leadership team is on a new vesting schedule. I think it was 2 or 3 years, right? Mm-hmm. There's no need to try anymore, right? There's no like, hey, we're going to be here until 8:00 every single night. It's like, like you do whatever you want.
Really?
Yeah. Well, that's what happens, right? Because I think a lot of folks, they go work for big.
Did they feel the company sold out? Like, was that kind of like the feeling around the company?
Oh yeah, everybody, because what who's pushing you, right? You have this all-star leadership team, the CEO, the COO, right? VP of product, all have moved on to doing other great things, right? Pushing you, like, we can do this, like, I believe in you, yada, yada, yada. And then they sell. They're there as figureheads at that point, right? That's when, Nordstrom doesn't just show up and say, hey, this is us, right? The company continues running as usual, but like that whole massive, like, oh my God, we have 6 months of runway. What are we going to do? We have to keep pushing. That all disappears, right? Because now there's unlimited runway. There's unlimited money, right? So it's like, yeah, so your goals and stuff, we're still going to align with them. We're still going to push them, but nobody is really pushing you as hard anymore, right? Like, it's like, yeah, it's like, where should I put my money? You know what I mean? Like, what company, what stocks should I invest in? Or what do I do about this, right? Like the conversations that you're having are slowly starting to change. And this happens, it's natural, right? It's natural for that to happen, right? So after 2 or 3 years, all the leadership team went on to do other things, right? They also did other companies. And that sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. Like at Twitch, for example, one of the founders stayed, right? There was 4 of them. One of the founders stayed and he still is the CEO of Twitch. But then one of them, happens to be the president of Y Combinator now, right? So they all, the thing that's really great about startups is that you have to be good and you have to be fast, right? And that takes a little bit of luck, right? So, startup folks, are usually the ones that get paid the least, right? Like startups don't have money, but are facing the toughest challenges, right? You don't do it for the money, you do it for the challenge, right? Once that challenge is gone, doesn't matter if Nordstrom bumped everyone's salary up, $100,000, right? Now you're getting paid 150, 200, 300, right? The challenge is gone. You don't care anymore, right? So you sort of like start to, sort of like
wander,
right? Like, oh, like, let's find something new. And that was my time, right? That was like about a year after that was my time to sort of like, you know what, I'm going to quit. I'm going to take a break from all of this and, just sort of like find the right business partners, right? Mm-hmm. And just work on, something of my own, right? I want something of my own. I fucking hate having a boss. I fucking, like I question things and, sometimes I'm right. And, so like, I just, my boss at the time was like, yeah, you should be doing this, you should be starting your own company. So I know that was very long-winded.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you went to school, kind of like how I did. I don't even do what I went to school for at all.
Yeah.
Do you regret that part at all? Would you still have went to college if you had the choice?
I think about this. I don't know how you feel about it. I guess I feel like it's on everybody's mind a little bit, right? Like, I think it's hindsight 2020. I was a dumbass kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, do I think about like, oh, if I ended up doing CS and hung around the CS kids that have all gone off, and done certain things, right? Like, would I be more successful? Would I be living in San Francisco right now? And honestly, I don't know, because I was a fucking computer nerd growing up in high school, right? And then I got the opportunity to join a frat, which is why I started partying, right? Like, whatever reason, these 2 twin bros, Milk and Cooks, like they're somewhat of local famous Chicago DJs, lived across the hall from me, and we became best of buds, and still are. We still talk. And they're like, "Yo, you got to join our frat." And I was like, "Okay, like I'll do that, right?" And then I met a lot of great people from that, and I became, outgoing, and I became much better at selling people and becoming more of a people person, rather than just sitting in front of a computer screen. So that probably played a role in that whole process too, So every once in a while the thought comes up, but I don't know. I think life, you're just sort of on the path. I also owned a ton of Bitcoin, in 2011 that I ended up selling when it hit, 2013, it hit $1,000, right? It's like, wow, if only I had known, right? I'd be able to do whatever the fuck I want right now, right?
If you didn't sell.
Yeah, if I didn't sell, right?
Did you have it when it was like in the teens?
Yeah, but I bought it again when it was like, so I bought it, it was like a couple bucks, right? And then I bought it, then I sold it, and then I bought it when it was a couple $1,000, and then I sold it, right? So it's like, oh man, if only I had known. But who knows? You know what I'm saying? Life takes you on the path that you should take, right? So I try not to dwell on those things because I'm happy with where I'm at today. I'm following my dreams, so I'm just thankful for that,
All right, Peter. For everybody listening, that's Peter Piekarczyk. Be sure to check him out at draftbit.com, as well as your personal website, right? Peterp.me.
Yeah.
Peterp.me. And now we're moving on to our listeners' favorite segment of the show. Miro is going to take off for this segment.
Welcome to the round with no name because they're all taken.
But his evil twin Miko is here. You will have 5 seconds. This is a no BS round. You will have 5 seconds to initiate an answer for every question. We don't want you thinking too much. We just want to know the real Peter Piekarczyk and who he is. Without further ado, here we go. What is your favorite book?
Tools of the Titans by Tim Ferriss. Fucking amazing.
Good selection. What is your favorite movie?
I don't think I have got a favorite movie.
We'll just say it's Silicon Valley, the show, right?
Sure, we could say that. I guess, if you want one, I would say Narcos. I think Narcos is even fucking better. But that's a TV show on Netflix, right? So.
Yes. If you had $100 right now, I handed it to you, and you had to turn it into $200 by tomorrow, same time, what would you do?
Oh man, I'd probably leverage the stock market with some QQQ.
So you're just waiting. You're just waiting for madness. Okay. What is your favorite app?
Headspace, meditation app. Meditation changed my life. I know it's a cliche, but Headspace.
I have that app on my phone, and it's one of those things I downloaded and never opened for like the last 2 years now.
Oh man, I'm telling you, force yourself to do 3 minutes a day for a month. You'll get sucked in.
I do it on my iWatch.
Okay, cool.
Breathe.
Yeah.
But I got to check it out now that you mentioned it. Because sometimes someone's got to like mention it and you're like, I got that thing.
Fucking changed my life.
How do you drink your coffee?
Black, pour over every day, make my own.
Straight up, huh?
Mm-hmm.
A study in the Huff Post says that those that drink black coffee, and I'm one of them, I'm trying to wean myself off though, definitely show psychotic tendencies.
I'm definitely a psychopath, so.
There we go. Entrepreneurs, baby. If I walked into your office right now with swim trunks and socks and sandals, told you, hey man, I got the next $1 billion idea. Can you listen to me? Would you take me seriously?
Yeah, but I'd have to go put on my own pants first because I'm not wearing any.
Well, that's how you do interviews nowadays, right? COVID-19, coronavirus style. Which person, and you've met a lot of people, who have you been most nervous to meet so far in your journey?
Nobody, but one person does stick out, and that's Alexis Ohanian when we were raising money from his fund. So he hit, like when we were going through YC, he approached me and said, yo, can you show me Draftbit? And so we sat down. People were coming up to us like, oh my God, can I take a picture with you? Can I take a picture of you? And be like, just a second, and be like, can you pull this up? And the internet was really shitty. And so I couldn't show him the full tool at the time. And I was like freaking out. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I wasn't like, I know like my co-founder was shitting his pants, he's like, oh my God, I was fine about that. But I was nervous about the whole experience.
Did you ever talk to him again after that?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
emailed him a bunch of times. Yeah.
Did he reply?
Yeah, he replied. Mhm.
Okay. So at least it didn't all go to shit.
Yeah.
And here we're prepping you for what might come. Hopefully it doesn't, but we don't know. But if you're about to be stranded on an island and you need to bring one item with you, you only have time to grab one thing, can't be a person, what would that thing be?
I mean, does food aside, it doesn't matter.
One thing, man. One thing.
Oh, I don't know. Let's a book. Oh, a Kindle. Kindle with 1,000 books on it, probably.
And a solar panel like charger on it attached, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
And last but not least, if you had an unlimited amount of money right now and you could start up any business you want, not a non-for-profit though, what would it be?
Non-for-profit. I'd be doing the same thing that I'm doing now, or I would do
not your own. I do.
Oh, okay. I'd probably do something with infrastructure. Something along the lines of transportation, etc. Some infrastructure. I love infrastructure. Could be web infrastructure, could be physical infrastructure, building data warehouses or inventory warehouses.
Awesome. That's a pretty unique answer. That's a to boss exclusive. All right. Miko is out. All right. I hope you survived Miko, my evil twin. He is quite the character, and he's pretty tough on you. But you're there. I'm here. Peter Piekarczyk of Draftbit.com. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's definitely been a pleasure. The mic is yours here at the end. Let us know any other final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. Check out Draftbit if you're interested in building a mobile app, right? And I guess if you are interested in, starting your own company or whatever, I always say, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me, peter@draftbit.com, or hit me up on Twitter. I think everyone's capable of doing it, right, in their own way, right? So if you're ever feeling like you can't or you shouldn't or whatever, just take the plunge, because you can always get a job, but you may not always be in a position to be able to start your own company, right? So,
especially right now, if you unfortunately have been laid off, or you're short on hours, or took a pay cut, and you have so much extra time because you're not going out on the weekends, right? Because you really can't take that time, right? Look into something different. Now is that opportunity. You got to look at it as a blessing. As bad as it is out there, you have to look at the good of it.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to your journey, and we'll definitely be catching up. Take care.
Thank you.
That is all for this episode of Boss to Boss. Your next step is to visit bosstoboss.com, where you will find proven techniques followed by professionals to help you make that next step. Again, that is boss2boss.com. And remember, the time is now.